Happy New Year to you, Andy Jabor. Happy 2024. There was a little rhyme in there, but how are you? How was your holidays, Andy?
Dave, Happy New Year to you and to those that are listening. Happy 2024, the year of the dragon, I'll add, which for those of us born in the bicentennial of this country, we're all very excited about that. I'm sure. Happy New Year. And Dave, happy fresh new haircut for you too. Your hair looks very good today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was good. I had a growth on my face too. I think I put on so much weight this last 2 weeks that I was trying to hide the fat rolls underneath my chin.
Nice.
And
Nice.
so, but I think I just got to go strong with it at this point.
You look good. You look good.
Yeah, I think you could probably squeeze me out. You could probably get enough oil and probably fatty acids or something. But it was bad. It was bad, Andy. I was devouring anything and everything within my sight. It was bad.
That's a very sexy start to the new year. So with the idea of squeezing oil out of your body, Dave, where are we going in this new year of the Men of a Certain X podcasts?
All right, Andy. So it is a Wednesday. Usually we talk a little politics here today. We've got a lot of stuff that we need to cover that is over the 2 weeks. We did have a pod last week. We worked one in, but we have to first start, Andy. I think everyone is dying to hear about the Lions Cowboys matchup. Look, there's been a lot on X. There's been a lot on Threads. There's been a lot everywhere. Anything on the controversial ending here. I was in Atlanta watching the game from a sports bar or some sort of bar. But that's another story. That'll be a rant in a minute here. But let's focus on the Cowboys game. Thoughts, takeaways, impressions, your love for the Cowboys endures. Is that what it is?
Yes, I'll say my love for the Cowboys and NFL officiating indoors. And Dave, we could spend an hour where I could share a lot of thoughts here. Anybody that's connected to me on Threads has seen a barrage of Lions related comments over the last few days. I'll just say that the Dallas Cowboys officially won the football game. Good for them. And I think we'll leave it at that, Dave. Good for them. I think that's probably the safest place. So I'll tell you, I'll say this, I did not care so much about the loss. Like I was like, it didn't really matter. I didn't really care until the next day when Philly somehow managed to lose to the Cardinals, and all of a sudden the Lions were not the 2 seed because the Eagles blew it. That killed me. That drove me nuts. That
Yeah.
game then became really consequential. But it's neither here nor there. I think it's probably has given Dan Campbell and the Lions a ton of raging fuel to go into the next couple of weeks with, which at the end of the day may serve them well. So could see a Dallas-Detroit rematch in Dallas here in a couple of weeks, which would be very
Yep.
interesting. We'll see where it goes. And if I could just make one more NFL note, Dave, 'cause I know we're going elsewhere today. I know you've got some thoughts on this too. Just to reference back to last week's podcast, I think it's been decisively concluded that MV Purdy is in fact not the NFL's MVP. Everybody's agreed that it's Lamar, right? It's been decided, right? So I'm just glad that fork has been stuck in the former MV Purdy MVP no more. Dave, I know you've got some thoughts on this too. I'll give you back the floor.
Yeah, I mean it's clear. I mean, from the moment Lamar and Purdy went head to head, that Lamar is the MVP. I think he's some like who would vote against it at this
Yeah,
point? I mean,
yeah.
you're either a San Francisco beat writer or just somebody who has been watching a lot of football. With regards to the Cowboys game, all I'll say is the Cowboys were thoroughly outplayed. I think this is just where I like Dan Campbell as a coach. He passed up early in the game a field goal when he could have
Yeah.
gone, from within the 10-yard line. And then he kept going for it on the 2-point conversion. I get wanting to stick to your guns, but if that game goes to overtime, the Lions win that game. I mean, it just, if he would have just kicked the extra point, I think no doubt the Lions were going to win that game. But I think we'll get the rematch, and it will be the same situation. Cowboys will have the home field. It will be a great game. I think they played really. It was a good matchup between the two teams. I still think San Francisco's a cut above, just like I think Baltimore's a cut above. But we'll talk our Power Five probably next week, and then we'll probably get into some. We'll know the playoff matchups and some good games this weekend.
Yeah.
So we'll maybe go through some predictions on that front. But Andy, I have a larger rant.
Oh man,
And
let me go ahead and cue it up, Dave, because I know we're going to a dangerous place. So good. Let's do it. Let's hear this one.
Okay, so I mentioned I was in Atlanta, and the reason I was in Atlanta is because my boys, Look, I think probably you're the same way, Andy. We're hard to buy for presents and such.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Penn State made the bowl game, the Peach Bowl, a New Year's Eve, a New Year's Six Bowl, which is one
Yeah.
of the higher bowls. It's more prestigious. It was the Peach Bowl in Atlanta. And so my boys thinking, hey, this is great. Atlanta's only 3.5, 4 hours from Charlotte. Let's take dad to the game.
Yeah.
And so they
Awesome.
got me tickets, and I went with my second son, Matt, to the game. We drove and then stayed the night in Atlanta. The game was an atrocity, not just because Penn State lost. It was, I mean, Penn State played Ole Miss, and they were 10 and 11 in the poll, or the final college football ranking, or whatever that means. Next year, the playoffs will be 12 teams. This year's 4 teams. But aside from the 4 teams that are in the playoffs, every other team now, these players don't want to get injured.
Yeah.
It started about 5 or 6 years ago. And look, I mean, if you're a high potential draft pick, you play what is effectively a meaningless game, a bowl game, and you could damage your future earnings. I get it. I completely get it. This goes back to the discussions about, the transfer portals and NILs. I am supportive of the players doing what's right for their future potential, and they should be getting a cut of these things. The
Yeah.
problem is that what results is a game like we saw, not just within Penn State and Ole Miss, but within Florida State and Georgia. Now, there's other dynamics that are going on there, but Penn State had the top rated defense this year in terms of yards allowed. They played great all year. If their offense was even remotely good, they would have beaten Ohio State and potentially could have beaten Michigan this year. And they could have been in a playoff game because their defense was so good and they kept those teams to very low scores. They're playing Ole Miss, and the run up to the game was the coaching staff was saying, "Hey, all of our players are playing. We have one player who's opted out, not going to play, and he is a future first round draft pick. Great player." However,
Yeah.
it then slowly started trickling out that, yeah, they're going to play, but they're only going to play like 2 or 3 plays, or they're going to play 2 or 3 series, and so the Penn State starting defense, which was again the top rated defense in yards allowed, wound up having 8 or 9 players just not play the full game. And so Old Miss just they destroyed Penn State. I mean, they're wide open players all around. And the news was all about how Old Miss put up 500 yards on the top rated defense, like without any mention of the opt outs or the.
Yeah.
But this is a problem, Andy. This is like one. The stadium was sold out, 71,000. It was a sold out event. A lot of Penn State travels. That's why they get some of these bowl games, because they do bring in a lot of revenue. A lot of people come from all over the country. Atlanta is a big hub for Penn State too, so there's a lot of people who locally there. Boom to the economy, boom to the venue, with the carrot that they're going to see a good game. They're going to
Yeah.
see their team go out and play. And here you have teams now, um, they're a shell of themselves. These bowls, and Andy, when we were growing up, and this is a get off my lawn moment here, but when we were growing up, I loved watching the Pull and Weed Eater Bowl, or whatever the bowl, the Thrifty Car Rental Bowl,
Yeah.
or whatever it was. I loved watching those games. Now I don't care. I mean, I honestly, I could, like, if they're on, great, they're good background, but like there's no purpose watching it. And that Florida State Georgia game was a complete debacle. And look, I get Florida State was upset that they missed out on the playoff. They had 19 people who were opted out. There's not 19 first round draft picks on
Yeah.
that team, Andy. And I think if we're looking at, there's 2 things here. One, if we're paying players and and they could say, well, this isn't a pay for play sport. You're paying players. Arch Manning's making $4 million being the third string backup at Texas. We're paying players. We're allowing them to transfer at will. We've got to start putting some rules and regulations around this. Like, for example, if you're going to get paid, you can't opt out. You have to, there's got to be some sort of agreement that you're not going to opt out. Or if you are, it's got to be that you have a first round grade or something from a major, draft circuit. The transfer portal is another thing is you have people who, as soon as that last game ends, and look, you can go in the transfer portal at any point in the year, but you are allowed to leave at that point. Coaches have to start recruiting people
Yeah,
mid-year. I mean, if they see that wide receiver that they need, they want to get him before somebody else does. And that's out of control. And basically, starting in that last game, people are transferring, leaving. Florida State, their backup quarterback, we all know their starting quarterback was injured, but their backup quarterback decided, hey, I'm going to transfer too.
yeah,
And so he left after the last game. So now Florida State's playing with their third string quarterback. Hey, look, he played an admirable game, but he's playing first string SEC
yeah.
team. That's not going to work out well for you. We've got to do something about the transfer portal, and we've got to do something about these just asinine rules for how we're going to manage it. It's a free for all right now, and it's embarrassing to the sport. I could go on more, Andy, but I'll just pause here and just see what your thoughts might be on this.
Yeah, but I think it's all fair frustration. Sometimes when we start going in a certain direction, whether it's sports or politics, right? We go too far to one side, and have to reel it back in. And I think that's kind of where the NCAA is right now with all things that you just discussed. It's sort of got a little bit too far out of control where you're starting to hurt the game and the fans, right? Those 71,000 that went to the bowl game and bowl games across the country over the last couple of weeks. They want to see their favorite team. They want to see the players they've been cheering for. They want to see a good game. They don't want to see the equivalent of NFL preseason football, right?
Right.
That's not the deal. Nobody goes to preseason games because nobody cares about who's fighting for the third string quarterback position on the team before NFL kickoff even happens. And it's not fair to the fans to ask them to pay a handsome chunk of cash. They show up, they drive or fly from across the country to see their team, their alma mater, whatever it is, and they're watching not the team they've been cheering for all year long, right? So it's a disservice to the fans, and I think the fans have to let their schools know, right? And I think you're right. I think there's ways to make it fair and reasonable, right? Maybe your top, the coaches make a decision. The top two or three players can sit, and everybody else like has to play at least three quarters or something. Like there's got to be a way to make it respectful to the players, maybe some sort of competitiveness amongst the players. Like you've got to be a top tier to get it. Not everybody is, like you said, a top tier player. There's got to be a way to do it more respectfully to the fans because the fans are the ones that show up. The fans are the ones that pay. The fans are the ones paying the boosters. The fans are the ones paying the NIL. And if we're not going to do that, if we're not going to treat them respectfully, it's just not the right thing to do. So hopefully things get brought back in. But at the end of the day, just like with the NFL, for all the grumbling we do, we keep paying for those tickets. We keep
I
buying,
know.
we keep sponsoring the sports, and so they take it for granted. And they're able to because we're dumb consumers and we keep paying even when we're upset. So it's a tricky one, but I think it's a fair rant. It's a fair frustration. I've never been too into college football or the bowl games. I've passively watched them, but now, like with the playoff system, which is great, like there's other bowl games that can be even less significant unless you really care
Right.
about your team. I think if you're going to bother to show up and care about your 20th ranked team playing some non-25 top 25 team, like you should do the right thing and show up for the game and do your best to win it. Have some pride in your school, have some pride in your win, and go from there. So it's unfortunate. Fair rant to start the year, Dave.
Yeah, and it's not just the players too. It's like the whole coaching thing is that like Penn State lost their defensive coordinator, who's we all knew he was going to leave. I mean, he was a great defensive coordinator, and but as soon as the season ended, he was getting interviewed for head coaching jobs, and I think they've got to look at some model that's similar to the NFL. The NFL has very clear league
Yeah,
schedule, and look, college football has very clear. I mean, all college sports has very clear recruiting periods. They need to start like saying, hey, here's when a head coach can leave. Here's when, if your team is out of contention, then he's eligible, he can interview and accept a job, or if your team is playing in a bowl game or something, he can interview and accept the job, but he's still until January 4th or whatever
yeah,
that the last game is, then that's the thing. And it is though, Andy. I mean, next year they'll go to a 12-team playoff. So, those New Year's Six bowls are not as significant because the first round is likely to be played at the school venue. So these bowl games are becoming less and less relevant, and I guess that's okay. I mean, I'm not crying over these some of these silly Poland Weed Eater bowls or whatever, but they are important to the fan bases, and it does important for a lot of different reasons, to the traditions of some of these schools and to the sport. But yeah, Andy, we'll drive on it. It's a rant that I'm aggravated about it. I will be interested to see this national championship game with Washington and Michigan next week. But again, they'll probably start the game close to 9 o'clock. I'll probably watch the first half and go to bed or whatever. But also, they can make a little bit more money off the people. So, anyways, that's neither here nor there. So, Andy, any concluding thoughts on that front?
No, Dave, I mean, fair. I think, look forward to becoming the commissioner of wherever it is with the NCAA, and you can right these wrongs. I think just a couple, couple of thoughts. We'll come back next week. I'm sure we'll look at who the national champion is. It will be crazy if the Harbaugh brothers win the college and professional football
Oh,
championships this
geez.
year. That would be insane. So, some interesting things to look forward to here. And, hats off to the top four teams. Look like two good, matchups, two good fights. Looks like the best teams won, and there should be a good national championship here. So, we'll see what happens in a few days, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, sounds good. Next Monday will be the championship game. Okay, Andy, let's transition to our next topic.
All right. All right.
Well
Where are we
done,
going
well
today?
played. Andy, it is Politics Wednesday. This is usually when we hit some of our political stuff. We had to combine because we didn't have Monday. We had to do the sports check-in.
Ah,
But here we go with Politics Wednesday, Andy. The big news, though, it was pretty quiet from a political front, I think, over the last couple of weeks, with the exception of two stories. One more minor one. I think we're seeing some more fallout from the Trump being barred from Colorado. Other states looked into it. Some states had said, hey, we're okay with Trump being on the ballot. It will be continuous interesting to see as we get to the primary season, which is going to, I think it's next week, Andy. Are we starting next week?
coming up. It's coming right up. I'll double check the date, but yeah, it's coming right up.
Yeah, so we've got the Iowa caucuses followed by New Hampshire, and why this is important, Andy, is because over the last 2 weeks, Nikki Haley finally had a gaffe, if you want to call it a gaffe. She really she was in a town hall meeting or some sort of question and answer session in New Hampshire, and somebody had asked her about the causes of the Civil War, and she gave an answer. And
Yeah.
nowhere along that line did she mention the word slavery, which then kicked off a quick rebuttal between the questioner and her. And basically, she said, "What more do I need to say about slavery? We all know that was a factor," but she didn't specifically call out. Andy, thoughts on this? And are we making more of this than we need to? Where do we go from here?
Yeah. So one, this is really, to actually tackle this as a complex discussion, right? So
Yep.
we'll touch on it today. The Iowa Caucus of Republicans, January 15th, by the way, Dave, coming up in
Okay.
about 12 days. But, so one, it was a miss by Nikki Haley not to directly mention slavery, right? I mean, yes, like that should have been clearly stated. But also, another example of gotcha politics where this was
Yep.
obviously a setup type question, right? And so, it's unfortunate that the question was posed the way it was just to trip her up. Unfortunate that she couldn't answer it more effectively, but even more unfortunate that we're at a point. This isn't new. This is where politics have been. Is that there's no room for thoughtfulness and nuance, right? The reality is slavery is interwoven with the founding of this country and some of the complex issues that were not settled at the founding of our country and the founding, of the current country, the new constitution that came into place. There were issues that were still unclear, unresolved. Our constitution was written codifying slavery, not a good thing, right? But that was reality because there's such divisiveness about the issue. And there were other issues that were still uncertain. And sort of, the Civil War itself was sort of a disaster that was seen coming. Several presidents sat in the White House, sort of just trying to maintain the Union, knowing that the Civil War was en route because of slavery and related issues that were just completely interwoven, right? The states' rights issues, which is a part of it, related but also separate from slavery. The primacy, right? Who's the decision maker? Is it the state at the end of the day or the federal government? Related to slavery, but also somewhat separate. And so those issues are complex. There is like background to all of them that should be understood. That's part of our country. And so there is some important nuance I think Nikki Haley was trying to speak to, but yeah, it was about slavery. Like it also was very much about slavery. Like you can't get away from that. That was the very clear and present issue, while the other nuanced issues were part of it. That was the one that was in our face. And while she's out on the stump, like she should know, like she's got to nail that answer, even if it's not exactly, the complete answer. So it's a silly political game. I don't know that anybody is going to change their vote because of her response, right? I don't think that really affected anybody. Like, oh wait, Nikki Haley's a racist. Like, no, she's not a racist, right? I don't think anybody thinks that because of her response. It just further galvanized those on the left and her supporters, in their camps. Silly political nonsense, and it takes away from us actually having a thoughtful discussion and addressing. I saw a lot of public figures, on social media sort of coming out and be like, it's clearly slavery. And yes, it is. But again, there's more to it. We should be able to talk about these things with thoughtfulness, with nuance, and address the reality that there were other issues at play, missed by Nikki Haley, stupid political games. This is where we are in America today.
Yeah, I think I reinforce that. I think obviously it was a miss. I mean, I mean, in some respects, it's a softball question because, look, if as much of it is as a gotcha thing, is like you should know that and just
Yeah.
say, hey, let's address that up front. And if you want to get into the more nuanced discussion, you can go there. But there's talking points that you can come up with and say, yeah, the Civil War was basis on slavery, but let's talk a little bit more about that. The bottom line though is it is a gotcha moment.
Yeah.
This is a designed. I mean, this is, and again, it wasn't designed to really flesh out Nikki Haley's views on racism and race in general. I mean, look at her record. I mean, she was responsible for taking down the Confederate flag
Exactly.
in South Carolina. So, but that's not convenient to that story, right? Obviously, she missed an answer, so therefore she's a racist. So we're going to label her and put that on there. But again, it was a clear miss, and it does cause her a little speed bump. She's got time to recover from that, of course. I just find it interesting that again, look, Chris Christie's come out, has come out. The governor from Florida, DeSantis, has already come out and said it. Joe Biden even came out and put on X, yes, it was slavery. Look, these are all moments that they're going to try to latch on to. It's an unfortunate moment for her. She's got a couple weeks now to figure it out and rally around it. But I will be interested to see. These are the same people, though. Same thing with like Trump. I don't think Trump really had a position or came out one way or the other on this front. But something like this would not stick at him at all, and yet it still lingers a little bit around Nikki. I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on Nikki Haley, Andy?
Well, I think the interesting thing again is, whoever was sort of motivated that question and the publicity around it, right? It shows that she's again getting more attention, right? The Trump machine is out after Nikki Haley. I think Democrats are starting to come out after Nikki Haley because, as we've seen in state and local elections, Democrats are happy to support a Republican they think they can beat, as Republicans are happy to support Democrats they think they can beat. And if I'm the Democratic National Party, if I'm Joe Biden's team, I look at Donald Trump and Nikki Haley. Donald Trump has a ceiling, it'll be close, but I still think they can feel like they can beat Donald Trump. I think they look at Nikki Haley and I think they say, this is a problem, right? If it's Joe Biden versus Nikki Haley, this is a problem. And I think we're going to see more and more attacks on her because I think on the Democratic side, I think they'd rather see Donald Trump walk away with the nomination than Nikki Haley. And certainly Donald Trump would like that too, right? So it shows that she's really become a threat to both, the front runner in the Republican Party and the Democrats, and that's a credit to her, even as she struggles with this current situation. But I think she'll bounce out of it. I think the real question is how does she do in New Hampshire? But we can talk more about that as we get closer. Obviously, there's some questions with Chris Christie and his polling numbers and her polling numbers. Interesting to see it play out. We're just weeks away from this thing starting, and 2 months from now we'll have been through Super Tuesday, and who knows what we'll be looking at then.
Yeah, it's going to be a radically different environment in the coming weeks or so. So yeah, Andy, I think with that, two big areas to get into today. We hit them both. my rant, and then we talked a little Nikki. So let's wrap up. Let's wrap that up for the podcast this week. We've got more to get into on Friday. We're back on our regular schedule though, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The pods will be out. Please check our YouTube channel as well. We'll have the podcast up there, as well as I try to get in there and put some clips in there and some funnies that we do throughout this show. But please share with your friends. We appreciate all the followers. And with that, Andy, Happy New Year. We look forward to an exciting 2024 with you on this podcast.
Happy New Year, Dave.